Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. So, by the time that you're listening to this recording, this first 10 or so minutes is actually an encore. So, when I did the live class, I actually forgot to record the first 10 minutes, alhamdulillah. So, I am coming back to record that to mesh with the rest of the initial live class, alhamdulillah. So, let's start off with a dua. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Thank you to, I'm not sure who this is joining live, but assalamu alaikum. So we're going to start with opening dua. So the way that this goes is that I'm going to lead us in an opening dua. If you are listening to the recording, what you're going to want to do is follow along, and then inshallah I will give you a moment to make your own dua. So bismillah. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Ya Allah, thank you for joining us together for your sake. Ya Allah, please make it easy for us to please you and worship you as you wish. Ya Allah, allow us to hear and obey. Ya Allah, allow us to remember you frequently. Ya Allah, forgive us when we fall short. Ya Allah, allow us to realize that there is no perfection but you. Ya Allah, allow us, help us to rely on you alone. Ameen, ameen, ya Rabbil Alameen. Go ahead and take a moment and make your own dua, inshallah, and then we will begin with the content, inshallah.
Why didn't you take it to school?
Okay, so we're going to start off, inshallah, with where does the word happiness come from? So the root word in happiness is the word hap. And this is a word from about the 1100s, a Middle English root word, and it means luck, accident, or happening. Now, the interesting thing is when we pull this into the context of Islam, is there really a place for this? Because in Islam, luck doesn't actually exist. Every single thing, whether it is how, something happens in your day, or whatever the case may be, it is perfectly calculated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by His will. So let's look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says when He talks about enjoyment, which a lot of people would say that enjoyment and happiness are very linked together. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in His Quran, "O my people, surely this worldly life is nothing but a quick passing enjoyment, and certainly the hereafter, that's the home that will last forever." Now, does that mean that we don't enjoy this world? That's not what it means, actually. We are encouraged, and if we look at the prophetic way of living, the life of our Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we're encouraged to love our lives and live happy lives and whatnot. But we are not encouraged to love this temporary world more than the permanent world. And we do have to see this world for what it is, being imperfect and having lots of tests. And this brings us right to Surah Al-Dharriyat. I quote this ayah all the time. And it is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in ayah number 56, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. And I did not create the jinn or mankind except to worship me. This is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly tells us that our purpose in this life is to worship Him. Now, does this mean that we basically pray 24/7? That's not what it means. Worship could be anything. And when we really figure out how to align what we want to do and make it for the intention of worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is when we are the most successful, inshallah. Now, one of my favorite concepts comes from our beloved scholar, Hamza Yusuf. And he shares with us that we have a physical being and we have a spiritual being. And I love the way that he puts this, that I incorporated it here in the notes, and you could see the source is Hamza Yusuf. So our human soul, our spiritual being, is always looking for eternal happiness. It wants happiness to last all the time. And our spiritual self also looks to elevate us. Now, our physical being is always looking for instant gratification. So the problem comes when we search for that eternal happiness in this dunya. The eternal happiness doesn't exist in this dunya, but there is plenty of happiness that we can have. So we have to see the dunya for what it is, temporary. Now, I've put together a list of 10 things that are by far the top 10 reasons, in my opinion, using, psychology, using my personal experience, using the experience of many women that I've worked with one-on-one, so many things. And these are my perspective of the top 10 reasons why people are not happy. And I call them happiness busters because they kind of squash your happiness. Number one is when we compare ourselves to other people. Now, this could happen when we compare our behind the scenes, what happens behind the scenes in our life, to someone else's highlight reel. It could be comparison is a big part of a lot of people's cultures, family speaking. Many times parents may compare siblings to one another. It's natural, it happens, but nonetheless, it makes for unhappiness for sure. Ethnically speaking, that happens for sure in many cultures. Number two, when you're stuck in stagnation and you don't make progress, when you aren't moving forward, when you have the pause button on, when you break promises to yourself. Oh, this is actually a typo. No, actually, it's not a typo. Breaking promises to ourselves. Just kidding. When we say we want something, but we don't go after it, we feel stagnated, and that could cause us to feel very frustrated. If you're a person who is a perfectionist by design, that is classic me. That happens to a lot of people who are the eldest siblings in their family, and other people as well, for sure. But nonetheless, you want to learn how to be an optimalist. I would encourage you to read up on Brian Johnson's work on being an optimalist. Not an optimist, that's good too, but an optimalist, someone who looks for the optimal thing that they could do in a situation versus perfectionism, because perfectionism paralyzes you, because perfectionism is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. When we have too wide of a gap between what we think our life should be like and what our life is actually like, when this happens, we are going to feel frustrated. So what we'd want to do there is we'd want to take action steps to get our life closer to what we want to be, or we might want to reconsider what we are chasing after. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. We also might find ourselves pretty, the opposite of happiness when we are defining happiness esoterically. So when we think that happiness in this world is forever, or when we forget that happiness is a choice, when we think, someone's just going to save us. I'm sorry, but no one's coming to save you. It is a choice, and you have to take that action step. And I don't say that to be harsh. I say that to empower you. Here's what I was talking about before as to why you might want to consider changing the way in which you look at what you're going after. Sometimes we chase goals that aren't really ours. They might be goals that are pushed on us by well-intentioned family members. We might be peer pressured by those around us. We might be doing what we think is best because, I don't know, a magazine said so or an article said so, rather than tuning into ourselves. Now, I'm not saying that we should be oblivious to what's going on in the world, but you should make sure that you're making decisions that you want to be doing. There are too many people who are chasing things and becoming so overwhelmed because they're chasing things that have been pushed on them, or that they don't really want, or that they're not ready for. Okay, what else? Being stuck in the past or future rather than engaging in the present moment. So we all have bad things that happen to us sometimes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, and it's okay to be sad, but when we dwell in the past for too long, or the flip side, when we're anxious about something and we worry about the future for too long, the key word there is too long. And you might ask me, okay, Yasmin, well, how long is too long? I'm going to tell you this. You know very well when too long is for yourself. It's when you have been dwelling on something for a long time. Now, another reason people commonly are not happy is because if they're dealing with frustration and if things aren't going their way. And let's think of it like this. If you If things always went your way, if you got everything that you ever wanted, I really highly doubt that you would have registered for this class. And I really doubt that, I think, I haven't made the latest count, but I think it was like 70 people who registered. I really don't think a single person would have registered. I wouldn't have had any, reason to, create this class, because it is so easy to be happy when things are going your way. And I don't mean that to be cynical. I love when things, go my way, and I love when things go your way for your sake as well. But this world is meant to test us, and our perspective is everything. We have to own our perspective. Now, here are some examples. Number one, not wanting to depend on ourselves. This goes back to the whole concept of wanting someone else to save you. Sometimes people get frustrated because they don't want to do something for themselves, but they feel like someone else should be doing it for them, and that creates frustration. If an inconvenience comes up, like, hey, Yasmin, you're 10, 15 minutes through your live class and you forgot to hit record, alhamdulillah. And I did think about hitting record, by the way, right before I prayed salah when after I connected, but I didn't for whatever reason. But nonetheless, it's an inconvenience. But what am I going to do? Sit and, be mad forever? No, take action, do something about it. If you want something and you don't get it, that's grounds for frustration. Let's see what else. If you get something you don't want, that's also grounds for frustration. If someone lets you down, that is as well. If you're late, if you're embarrassed, those are all examples there. Let's see. And then chasing external validation for our worth. That also happens. And then let's see, fighting what's for the most part out of your control. So some things are just out of your control. The will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, genetics could be out of your control. And when I say could, meaning you don't get to decide what your genetics are, but the lifestyle, the way that you live your life, you do get to kind of decide what gets turned on and what gets turned off. The weather, you can't control that. The perceptions other people have about you, you can't control that. The actions of others are some examples. And then 10th, last but not least, is confrontation with a shadow. So if you're familiar with psychology, you might be familiar with this term, but basically a shadow is a part of yourself that you maybe deny because you're ashamed of it, or whatever the case, you've been told it's not that good. And sometimes we see our shadows in other people consciously or subconsciously, and it could bother us because it's something we're not expressing in ourselves. So when you're in a state of not feeling happy, I encourage you, or even just in general, to circle the top 3 happiness busters that you think you struggle with the most, and you can reflect on those. And if anyone has any others, anyone have any other ideas, you could share in the chat of happiness busters. Now, is our perspective correct? So happiness isn't about being happy all the time. When we get to the question shortly, some people were saying how sometimes, even Islamically speaking, we're told that we can't feel sad, or, we can't, feel other emotions, but happiness is temporary in this world. And sadness is temporary as well. And a lot of times, this is a little bit of a generalization, but for women, it's very common to suppress anger, because we've been taught that. And for men, it's been common for them to suppress sadness, but rather expressing all of these emotions properly in accordance to the sunnah is very important for our well-being. It's important to remember that our bodies are temporary, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is forever, and our soul is forever. Now, techniques for when everything is going wrong. So first and foremost, when you feel like everything is going wrong, you want to ask yourself a question. Is this from a systematic problem or an external inconvenience? For instance, if it's something that happens every single day, it's probably a systematic problem. If it's something that's out of your control, and you have that list before that says like what's out of your control, then then it's an external inconvenience. So here are some steps of what you could do in either way. If it's an external inconvenience, you should first recognize the test. You should also express yourself. I know we had a lot of women who signed up for this, and as women, sometimes we don't express ourselves, but it's so important to express ourselves. You should do what is in your control, and then you should surf the wave and have sabr. And sabr is not, it's a very, very deep word, and we're going to talk about it a little bit. I made a little homework assignment. If you want to go through, you can, and there's a part there where you could kind of grade yourself on where you think you are patient-wise. And patience doesn't mean being frustrated and not talking about it and not doing anything about it. Patience is about doing your part and relying on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I know that's not the first time that you've heard that. Now, if it's a systematic problem, it's something in your life that happens all the time, you want to ask yourself what needs to change. If it is happening all the time and you don't want that to be the case, you don't want that to be your life, you need to ask yourself what needs to change, what mindset needs to change, what way of thinking has to change, what actions have to change, and what resistance needs to be dealt with. Now, as a holistic health and lifestyle coach, those of you familiar with me know that I love to talk about wellness. I made a list of certain things I know that help me, natural, healthy ways to boost my mood. And I put a little checkbox, so you could go through and use that. But I'd also encourage you, you'll see right here, and I have it highlighted, that you can list other ideas that work for you. And I see here that Sister Ola shared some things that work for her. And actually, we have some of the same ones: nature, journaling, solo time, but that would actually be happiness boosters. When I said busters before, those are things that stop us from feeling happiness. So I apologize if I wasn't clear there. Now, what is Islam's secret to contentment? Remind yourself that the dunya is temporary. Focus on progress. Allow yourself to feel everything. Do a mental detox regularly, and take care of your physical body. Those things are so important. And then a secret key for every single one of those 10 happiness busters I mentioned before are action. When you take action, that is what breaks through frustration. Action. Moving forward is the key to happiness in life. And you've heard it before. If you're familiar with Finding Nemo, just keep swimming. If you're familiar with Marie Forleo, one of her favorite quotes of mine that I quote all the time is, clarity comes from action. And other than that, a mental detox, absolutely. So I'll get to that in the Q&A. Thank you. By the way, you can submit Q&As, let's say till 7:30. We'll probably go for 5 minutes after, inshallah. I have a lot of questions. If you read the schedule that I put out on social media today, and then I emailed a few minutes before this, if I want to respect everyone's time and stay as close to possible, as I said, this would last. Any questions that I don't get to answer live tonight or in the morning, if it's somewhere else for you, I will actually answer by the recording, either through typing it up in the notes or maybe recording something separate. But if you have a question, you could submit them now, inshallah, and they will go to that list. And then another thing to realize is that if we really look at it, the 5 pillars of Islam are all actions. And some people might say, well, the shahada is not really an action, but it actually is. And when we say it in tashahhud, we do, lift our finger up, and it is a huge action. It is proclaiming Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's tawheed. So one way to help you stay actionable is I've created this consistency guide. And we know through hadith, anyone ever hear this hadith before, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that the most loved deeds by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the ones that are constant, even if they're few. So I broke out life into a bunch of different areas: salah, family responsibilities, patience, honesty, gratitude, joy, helping others, work, etc. And I'd like you to take some time, not right now, but after this class, and you could either print this or you could do it on a separate piece of paper or you could do it digitally. And you want to grade yourself 0 to 10. How consistent are you in each of these areas? And then in column 2, where do you want to be in each of those areas? And then on the bottom, you want to reflect a little bit on that, because truly the way to happiness in this imperfect world is continual progress, continual progress. So I know that that is a whole lot of content. My promise was to keep it concise, which, alhamdulillah, I do think was the case. If you have questions, I would love to hear them. I received a bunch, and I'm going to take some time to answer some now. And like I said before, in order to respect everyone's time, anything that I already have, like I think 21 questions here, and we already got one live question, I will answer these questions, inshallah, and send them out with the recording. Let's start with our live question to honor those who came in live. So explain what a mental detox is. So we've heard about physical detoxes, right? But mental detoxes is when you kind of clear your brain. One of the best ways, and it's heavily practiced in psychology, is something called a brain dump. Has anyone ever heard of one of those before? I was just talking to a one-on-one client about this yesterday, but it's when you basically take anything that's on your mind and you just jot it down on paper. You don't focus on, okay, awesome. You don't focus on, it being pretty. I love writing stuff and making stuff look pretty, but you don't focus on what it sounds like, but you just empty your mind rather than just holding it all here. You instantly feel relief that way, and it helps your brain cognitively organize things. So that's one way for sure. Also, it's different for everyone, but doing things that really helps you clear your mind. For some people, it's reading a book. For some, it may be going in nature. For some people, it might even be watching something, which I know sometimes in the personal development world, people say, well, that's a waste. But sometimes for some people, it does help clear your mind. And, hopefully it's something wholesome, inshallah. But yes, that's what a mental detox is. Now, let me see here how we are time-wise. I'm going to answer a couple more questions, and then inshallah I'll answer the rest of these to be sent out with the recording. But let's see. Everyone says that happiness comes from inside. What does that mean? How do we know that? So happiness is a choice, and I posted about this on social media maybe like 2 weeks ago, if I'm remembering correctly, but it truly is a choice. And sometimes because of the culture we've been fed, I think that we like the idea of someone saving us or happiness coming from the outside. And there's definitely ways to make us feel happy externally. But if you're not choosing it from the inside of you, then you're allowing your happiness to be shifted by someone else. Does that make sense? So you can acquire happiness from other sources, but if you're not getting it from yourself, it's more likely to be shifted. And even from yourself, we're imperfect, it could get shifted as well. Someone says, I'd love to hear how you handle constant and overwhelming anxiety, how to overcome fear and fearful thinking, and in response to your what techniques can we do when everything is going wrong, how to maintain a faithful resilience when trying to recover from trauma. Really good question. So this is a heavily packed question. I would say, first and foremost is taking action steps. And I don't want to throw that out as a be-all, catch-all phrase, but honestly, when you're dealing with heavy things like that, if you're going backwards and you're dwelling in your fear or your fearful thinking or you're overwhelmed, you're going to get lost. But if you focus on what is one small thing I could do, let's say anyone here have a fear that they want to share in the chat, but finding like a small, concise way to kind of face it a little bit, and small action steps. Not something that's gonna, make you really scared or anything, but taking small, concise action steps. And I will put some more resources when I answer this. I will try to put some written text in the questions. Someone asked, what is Glow Academy? I'm going to save a couple minutes at the end to talk about that. Someone said, what could a wife do with a non-religious husband? So this is a great question for sure. Unfortunately, we're not able to change another person. And I think a lot of times, I see this a lot for sure. And, over time, this has been a common thing But a lot of times women try to change the men in their lives. And what ends up happening is a whole lot of frustration, because you can inspire someone, but you can't actually change someone. You could bring the horse to water, that phrase, or you could bring the horse to water, but you can't make it want to drink. And anyone here, I know there's some mothers here of teenagers, you know exactly what I mean. You can bring the horse to water, but you can't make the horse drink. So, and I mean, that could apply to other people as well. But the point is you have to recognize that. You also have to ask yourself, are you aligned with your husband? Is this, a marriage that, you want to continue with and whatnot? And if it is, then I would really focus on yourself, really focus on what's in your control, really focus on what you can do. Maybe also find out what, is this someone who used to be religious and isn't anymore? Is it, how is it impacting you? But really, you can only focus on your actions, and you can only decide what you want to tolerate in terms of I'm not saying to give up on people. That is not what I'm saying at all. But, you really want to stay away from trying to change someone and not focusing on what you can control. And there's many ways to inspire people. The number one way to inspire anyone is through your own actions. Someone said, how can I become a better Muslima and mother for my children during a divorce? So this is a really good question. I would say that, especially for divorced women, unfortunately, in our Muslim ummah, they do deal with a lot of shame and whatnot, and there aren't a lot of good resources. I would try to find others to connect with. I could think off the top of my mind a really good blog for single Muslim mothers that I will include when I put the notes out for this. And I would also say, again, focus on what's in your control. So with that being said, I said that I would go to 7:35 on the questions. The rest of these awesome questions, I promise you, will be answered. And you know that you're getting this recording within 48 hours, I promised, of this class ending. I will answer the rest of these questions because they're important. I want them to be answered, inshallah. I'm going to spend about a couple minutes, not too long, talking about Glow Academy. Some people know what it is, some people do not know. So I've been offering online classes for a while now. In couple weeks, so in October, Glow Academy is starting, and there are 4 3-month classes. Each class is 1 class per month that will be kicking off. There's an emotional freedom class for highly sensitive women. There's a self-care class for moms, a cooking and nutrition class for kids, and a prophetic inspiration class for entrepreneurs. I included some descriptions of each of these classes so you could read through them. These classes are all on a sliding scale, so what that means is you actually get to pick your tuition. There are 3 options, $19, $29, or $39 per month. And the reason that I offer sliding scale classes is because I really try to meet students where you are. You get the same exact classes, regardless of what option you pick. And this is one of the ways that I meet students where they are, since I can't do that same model for like my one-on-one coaching. You can see here very clearly, no problem, Assalamu alaikum, thank you for joining us. Let's see, you can see here when the classes start, and what's very cool is I've created some PDFs that some of you might have already looked at, but some PDFs that you could go through. I'll show you an example here that you can see if this class is for you. So it gives you a bunch of like yes or no prompts, and you could see like if this class is for you, depending on if those things sound like what you go through or what you need. And then, let's see. Okay, back to my notes. So that exists for all of those classes. And then the registration deadlines, you could register for all the classes up until their first start date. The link is right there. There are some benefits of registering by the early bird date, which is next Thursday, so in about 8 days. Anyone who does that gets free access to my Ramadan course, which is a pretty high value, gets entered into a raffle to win a one-on-one personalized coaching session with me. And it helps me out because the earlier people sign up for those, the more I could prepare. Less stress for you. And also, these classes are longer. Each class is an hour and an hour and a half once a month. But I personalize them, so you actually fill out like a class form before each class so that the content is personalized. So obviously, if you do that sooner, then that helps you out, get the material more personalized to you. And, you know, there was some great content today, but it's more in depth. You could also read some student testimonials of past classes that I've done. And with that being said, I think that's it. Before we end, does anyone want to add any live questions to be added to the questions that I'm going to answer? Sliding scale means that you actually get to pick your tuition. So each of those classes, you could pick if you want to sign up for $19 per month, $29 per month, or $39 per month for each of those classes. Whichever class you want to take, let's say someone's interested in like the emotions class, they get to pick. I do that to stay accessible to people of all different incomes, since I can't offer that kind of pricing for my one-on-one coaching. Does that make sense? So if anyone, I'm going to maybe wait a couple of seconds here. If anyone wants to add a question, that will be added to all of the questions that I'm going to answer. Or if someone just wants to say goodbye. Okay, well, thank you for joining. And we had 15 live here today, or maybe it was 16. I can't remember if someone else was here. But we had a total of, I think, almost 70 people who plan to listen to the recording. I didn't actually get to drink my tea yet, but I'm going to be drinking it right after this, alhamdulillah. But jazakallah khair. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or night. I hope to stay connected with you and keep on the lookout for all the awesome content that I'm going to send your way. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuhu.